passionate about. I'm going to start off with a series of slides here, and then we'll jump into the demonstration. Hopefully you can see what I'm showing, and if not, please somebody raise your hand. Let us know. Again, my name is Greg Bloom. I've been with the company for about 20 years now. Among other capacities, I'm currently serving in the role of Navigator Product Manager, and as I have been for the last 2 years, and as such, you may see my name on various blog posts and other information that's available. All right, as far as the meeting itself goes, the agenda is broken down as follows, pretty typical format to include an open Q&A at the end, so please be ready with questions, and as the opportunity dictates, go ahead and feed those to Maddie during the presentation. Inside the Zoom window, there is a panel at the bottom, and you can use that to engage in public chats. Raise your hand if you have any questions, and certainly also provide any questions. And Maddie, as the moderator, will keep an eye on those and react as necessary. For your information, you've all been muted. That's as a courtesy to everyone else, just to make sure that the noise volume is down. And unfortunately, I am unmuted. Well, fortunately, I'm unmuted, but hopefully there won't be any background noise that interferes with the presentation. All righty. A couple other slides. I think most of you know this, but Maddie and I work with Eos Group, a company that's been in existence for about 25 years now. We have roughly 30 employees that work remotely across the United States. We typically primarily serve the AEC market and provide a full range of consulting and development services to the top 400 E&R clients. In addition to Eos Navigator, we currently market a product called Cortex, which is a suite of project history solutions, and we're also a reseller of Sage estimating products. All righty. On to Navigator. So this is a slide that has information that's also on our website and some of our other marketing material. Most of you probably know this or have seen it, but I thought it would be a good way to introduce the discussion. Eos Navigator is our next generation management system designed to work seamlessly with Sage estimating and Eos Cortex. It provides the tools that today's organizations need to manage the estimating process across the enterprise. And it accomplishes this by providing unique workflow, integration, and collaboration features. So some pretty simple, high-level stuff, and hopefully as we explore the product in more detail, that'll all make sense. Here's a timeline of events over the last 10 years, a little history to give you some perspective. As many of you know, Navigator was preceded by EOS Explorer, which was first released in 2000. Explorer was a groundbreaking product that paved the way for today's Navigator. With Sage's announcement that they were going to move forward with their sequel product, we decided to replace Explorer in 2010. Navigator was initially released in 2013 with some exciting differences. No longer did we have the need to manage the physical file structure to organize estimates, so we introduced a virtual organizational structure. We also solidified our vision of projects as the container of estimates. And then by 2014, we realized that we were ahead of the market and decided to take a pause. During that 3-year period, we shifted our focus over to Cortex development, and upon returning, we had a better idea of how we wanted to advance the product, to include making some fundamental design modifications to the product. So in 2018, we re-released the product with an exciting new UI, leveraging the latest technology and resolving many basic workflow issues. All right, and here we are with the Navigator roadmap slide. The 2.3 version was released in March. As many of you may know, we focus specifically on state management, the ability to move projects and estimates between an active and an archived state, as well as to be able to delete and restore estimates and projects within the system. The 2.4 release, what we're looking at today, was initially intended to be a minor release. largely focus on building out integration frameworks. In addition to basic P6 export and cash flow reporting features, over the life of the release, we also added in the ability to manage nodes at the project level. We ultimately decided to extend the release schedule to align with SAGE's 20.1 release in July and use it to tune the application and specifically improve performance for large data sets. And you should be getting a notice either today or tomorrow announcing the release as available for download for any of you that are a maintenance client. And then once done, we'll move on to version 3.0. This will be a major release that will likely align with the SAGE 21.1 release, either late Q4 or early Q1. And then among other things, we will be introducing new dashboard functionality, more analytics, and a messaging subsystem. Some very exciting stuff. Alrighty, here's a few highlights that you're going to see in the release announcement. Really nothing further I want to say about this right now, but we can come back in the Q&A part and pick up on anything that we don't cover in the demonstration. And with that, I am going to move into demo mode. So you should be seeing a desktop for a virtual machine that's that I'm remotely accessing. As hopefully you're aware, Navigator is a desktop application. Given its tight integration with, with SAGE estimating, it needs to be deployed locally to your machine. It's not a web application. And as such, we've modeled it around common desktop applications like Windows Explorer and other productivity tools that Microsoft makes available. So I'll go ahead and launch it from my desktop icon, or taskbar icon, I should say. A change for those of you that have earlier versions of Navigator, we've introduced a licensing system such that it monitors number of active users and controls access during the launching step. So if I pointed out earlier, you would have seen that I'm one of 5 available. I'm acquiring one of 5 available licenses. Once in the application, you can gain some perspective on the overall layout. It's intended to look similar to Explorer, which again was modeled on Windows Explorer, but there are some very distinct differences that we'll discuss here. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and expand out what we refer to as the navigation pane on the left. You'll see in this case that we've organized our virtual hierarchy into a market organization. So as you traverse down through the hierarchy, you'll see that you get down into what we refer to as project types, and then within it, these projects, which again are our primary objects within Navigator, similar to what an item is inside of a SAGE estimate. We're looking at some demo data that we use for presentations. There are 100 projects roughly that we'll be looking at today, but I wanted to let you know that our clients are regularly using 5,000 to 10,000 projects and 30,000 to 150,000 estimates within their system. So this is tuned for a larger data set, as many of you I think will be using. Okay, so once I select the utility node, you can see that what we refer to as the active workspace was reduced to the 32 projects that were associated to utilities. There is a grid in the active workspace, which we refer to as a collection panel. And in it, we have a flat list of all the projects, as well as some information, which we refer to as attributes that helps describe each one of those projects. Within Navigator, you have the ability to modify what we refer to as the layout to see different information. You can have an unlimited number of personal or shared layouts. In this case, we're just adding on 5 or 6 additional fields that give you better clarity on what your project collection is. Within the grid, we have the ability to do things like group which in this case, if I group by project type, I can now see a hierarchical grid, no longer requiring the use of the panel, so I can remove that and generate some additional real estate. And then within the grid, I can do things like show summary. So if I wanted to get a sense of my, my potential revenue for T stations, we can summarize that there. And then based on these features and others to include filtering and sorting, this grid can be exported to Excel and easily shared with management or other concerned parties to to gain more appreciation of what your active backlog is. Okay, in addition to the ability to customize layouts, we also have the ability to customize the view, or I should say the workspace, by selecting an alternate view. In this case, we want to see the expanded information. So it's your same collection of projects. We're still filtered down at the utilities level. Maybe I want to study the portfolio and gain a better appreciation of what projects are in a bidding state. So I can highlight those. Just visually, I can gain a certain amount of information. In addition to that, reports are available, or the technology exists to implement reports that give you more information about the data that you're looking at. In this case, we are organizing the bidding projects or summarizing the bidding projects by project lead to show what volume of work they're responsible for. And then in addition to that, maybe what the project count is and the percent responsibility, which in this case tells us that Ed Williams is extremely critical to the future of the backlog and perhaps overextended. This is an example of an SSRS report that mines data out of the SQL backend database, in this case, exclusively the Navigator data, but it could also read information from the SAGE database as well. We'll look at that here in a little while. Some other examples might be a volume report, which gives you just a proportional distribution of revenue by project type. And then we also have an example of a scatter chart, which doesn't show well at that size, so it gives me an opportunity to undock the panel and show it like that. So if you want to analyze what the cost per size differential is, you've got some information to study there as well. Okay. So those are reports. Let me go ahead and collapse those guys. From this project group view, as we refer to it, we also have the ability to study individual records. In this case, if I wanted to highlight a single project, I could study the attributes that are associated to it, or I can expose a panel like estimate collection, which would explain the relationship between the project and the associated estimates. Similarly, the estimate collection has a series of fields that you can customize. Among them is the estimate total. And as you'll see here, there's a single record that's highlighted in green, and that estimate total amount matches the project total. What I'm trying to communicate here is that the estimate costs automatically roll up to the project level based on estimate inclusion, and you can optionally include multiple estimates. As estimates are closed within SAGE, Navigator receives notification that the information needs to be refreshed, and as such, all the revised cost information and other information as well gets rolled up to the project level. So we consider the relationship between SAGE and Navigator to be tightly coupled, and we've gone to great lengths working with SAGE development team to ensure that we have immediate access to the critical information so that we can ensure that the data is current. All right, so that's looking at the project collection at a macro level. I'm going to go ahead and hide this. Go back to my entire backlog and use the search feature to find my Dade County Federal Credit Union, which, based on the current climate, might be an on-hold project, but optimistically, it is bidding. So we're now down at the project level. We know that, among other reasons, because the banner here is a burgundy color to distinguish between estimates, which would be green. To review the panel collection in counterclockwise order, we have project information, which includes metadata, all the attributes and system fields, which help define what the project is. Without getting into too much detail, many of these fields are managed with lists and have limited values that can be applied. Some are automatically calculated. It's in many ways what the job class fields are at the estimate level, with restrictions and controls in place. New to Navigator 2.4 is this idea of project notes. We extended or continued the work that we did at the estimate level and brought it to projects. So we now have what effectively is a memo field that can store unlimited rich text data. You can add colors and bullets and update your font sizes, all that sort of stuff within the notes. And then we also have the ability to manage alternate, what we refer to as note types. So in this case, I've got some sample notes that we can take a look at. And this too is in line with what Sage provides within their application in terms of the ability to create multiple note tabs within their software. Within Navigator, it's the administrator's responsibility to define what the note type collection is, and all projects would then have the ability to capture information for each one of these tabs. All right. I guess what I meant to say is not counterclockwise, but top, bottom, left, right. I'm going to jump over to estimate collection real quickly. We already saw this this panel in the previous view. The difference being it's now captured within the project. Again, the collection of estimates that exist are limited to those that are associated with the project. So in this case, we have 3 estimates for 3 discrete parts of the project that collectively, because they're all included, they're all green, represent the total project cost down here at the bottom. And this panel at the bottom is kind of sort of similar to what you'd see in Sage on their totals page, but it groups together all the costs by cost category, again summarizing the 3 estimates which contribute to its cost, and then it rolls together the markups, the add-ons that is, into a single markup row. In addition to that, we have some information about the hours for both labor and equipment. Okay. So that's an orientation of project, and that's kind of the end of my typical presentation for Navigator overview. I appreciate the patience for those that have already been a part of a webinar or already have the product and are familiar with a lot of these basic concepts. And for those of you that are new, hopefully that was informative. Now what I want to do is move on to some highlight features that I want to focus on with this release. The first being validation. So it's a topic that gets a lot of discussion during the implementations. We have a couple sample validation jobs that you can run against your estimates. They're accessed a couple different ways, but in this case, I'm going to go to the estimate collection, and from the context menu for an estimate, I'm going to select the item cost check. Go ahead and click on that guy. What's happening in the background is we're gaining access to the estimate data. So first we need to make sure that we can exclusively access the information, and then we're using a rule-based engine to assess certain conditions. There's actually 7 rules in this case that we're checking for all of the, I can't remember how many items are in this estimate, 200, 300 items. And as a result, we are receiving no errors and 9 warnings. So as the name of the job implies, we're checking to make sure that all of the expected, that all of the items have the expected costs. Now, we're not trying to confirm that it's the right cost, especially with a simple demo script like this, but We're looking for things like, records that have missing material. So this is a report that you could print out based on our activity history subsystem. It's also available in the background if you ever want to reference back to earlier iterations of the estimate. The reason I wanted to focus on this, among other things, is to demonstrate our ongoing work to align our product with the advancements of SAGE estimating. So in the past, that was the extent of our validation. We've made some enhancements to the sample script so that now once, as part of processing, we not only report what's wrong, but we go into the SAGE estimate and show you what's out of place. So if I scroll down here, eventually we'll get to some cells that are highlighted in yellow. So if you haven't had a chance to experiment with 20.1, if you haven't upgraded, there's some key features that I think will be of interest to you. One is their advancement of the city cost index, now called factoring, which I'm not going to get into here today. And another one is their use of tags and highlights to give the individual users the ability to do just that. So in this case, we programmatically identified the specific record that failed validation. We changed the color of the background for the cell that is non-compliant, and then we added in a note. So this should make it very easy to the user that they need to go clean it up. And it could be as simple as saying that this record is excluded, or it could be, putting some small number in there, or maybe this was a real significant omission that needed to get corrected, something like that. So the colors don't automatically change. You'd have to go back and rerun validation in order to confirm that that warning is no longer there, but that's how that would work. And let me get rid of this. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Okay, that's it for my SAGE portion of the presentation. So back to Navigator. Another feature that I wanted to highlight today was estimate versions. So that's not new to the product, and hopefully some of you have had a chance to use this. So what we found over years of working with clients is it's not enough to just have an estimate. You also need to have Rev 1, Rev 2, Rev 3, or Rev 4 as a way to take a snapshot or a milestone of your progression. And what we've seen in working with clients is historically their folder structure is just littered with tens or hundreds of different estimates based on date or number or name or some other convention, and it really complicated their organizational structure. So what we've done is use the basic concept, the need, and gave you the ability to keep those older versions of the estimate, but suppress them within the system so that you don't see, in this case, the 4 versions of the estimate, just the final or current estimate version in your main estimate collection. Having said that, you can still get into these versions. Hopefully that comes back very quickly. You can still get into the estimate versions. You can access them through SAGE in a quote-unquote snapshot mode, meaning that you can access them with a temporary data set. Any changes that you might make to the estimate will be discarded when the estimate is closed. But again, it gives you the ability to go back and study your history. If you ever needed to roll back to a previous version, you could also do that. So along those lines, we spent some time to build out a report that allows you to compare. Now I need to refresh this report because we opened the SAGE estimate and we need to guarantee that we've got the right, the most current data as we're reviewing the results here. So this will just take a second. And now you're looking at another example of an SSRS report. Unlike the previous example, we're now showing results of the actual estimate details, items and categories and costs. So in this case, it's organized by division, group, and phase. We have the ability to expand out to the lower levels here. This is all dynamically generated, so if I use a different estimate on different projects, you'd see different organization, different rows. and the variance percent in dollars is relative to the previous estimate. So as you move left to right, you'll see the difference versus the the previous version. Pretty standard, straightforward stuff. We have the ability to export to Excel or PDF, and then once in the Excel format, obviously you could add in formulas and modify numbers and do whatever you needed to before printing it and sharing it with others. So nice little feature that I wanted to call attention to. All right, next up, I wanted to get into some of our highlight features. So now I'm at the estimate level. So we've got the green banner. So this is the primary estimate for this Dade County project. And just in terms of a quick orientation, it is very similar to what we saw at the project level. You've got your estimate information fields. All of this, well, much of this is stored natively within Sage, but some of it, information like activity, what else? Status information is actually unique to Navigator. Here's our validation results too. Over on the right-hand side, again, we've got totals and then notes. Okay, next up, cash flow. So we've, going way back to the beginning of my presentation, we did a lot of back-end plumbing work to improve our ability to integrate with other systems. That allowed us to do things like connect to a CRM system and create projects dynamically. It also gave us the ability to pump final estimate costs out to a project management system. With the build out and formalization of that technology, we also felt that it was important that we include some sample solutions at a smaller scale that would demonstrate how we could support your in-estimate operations. So cash flow is one that comes up a lot. And this is relatively simplistic, but I think exciting at the same time. So it's taking the data out of the Sage estimate, it's transforming it into a state that can be used, and then ultimately it's going to get dumped into Excel to a predefined template. And you'll see in a second, it'll then get used to generate a curve. This gives me a chance to get a sip of water. So for those of you that have worked with EOS tools in the past, we have a lot of experience with Excel, and it seems to be a convenient and comfortable medium for most estimators. And this is just another example of what we're able to do. The data, once exported, is a snapshot. It does not reflect changes that are made in the estimate after the report was generated. So if you needed to update it, you would have to regenerate the report and then make any additional customizations that you needed to do. So simple grid, with some attractive, hopefully, colors that organize the information in a meaningful way. In this case, it's simply grouping your costs by category and then spreading them over time. So we didn't look at it, but the project was divided into 8 months, and we're using those same 8 months to give you the columns. And I can do stuff with it. So it's all live data with formulas. So I can do things like that. We also have the ability to perform some automation. So in this case, we can pick from a curve and apply that. You can see that the percent distribution is automatically being adjusted based on the time frame that was defined. And to that point, we can also, what am I on, subcontractor? Maybe the sub doesn't get started until a little bit later in the job and rolls off before it's over. So you get information that's more specific. The net result of it is, here's your cost summary down at the bottom, and then the spending curve, which is a little bit backwards, but I guess makes the point of how it the data can be manipulated to tell the story that you need to tell. Okay, so that's an example of our first solution that leverages the integration progress. The second that we wanted to look at, let me go ahead and close this out, go back to Navigator, is our P6 integration. So the story is relatively the same. We're confirming exclusive access to the estimate, we're extracting the data, we're transforming it, and then we're exporting it. For those of you that are familiar with our previous incarnation of P6 integration, we were communicating directly with the Primavera API. We're taking a simpler route with this reimplementation by simply exporting the data to an XML file or a transfer file, if you will, that can then be imported into P6. You might be wondering why we're doing that. We found that the API was a little volatile at the time that we performed our previous implementation, and while powerful, forced a level of development that seemed beyond what the typical estimating user needed. So let me go ahead and perform the import operation. Apologies if I'm going too fast. Most of these steps are somewhat meaningless to the conversation, but I'm selecting the type of data that we're going to import, and I got to go ahead and select the file. It's pre-filled because I actually tested this before we got started, and then I'm going to go ahead and perform the import operation. So we're using the same data that we looked at when we went in to study the validation results. In this case, what am I doing? Open. As we'll see here, the items are rolled up into activities. It happened to be WBS5 in the case of what we did. It's similar to a uniformat hierarchy. With each of these activities, we are providing a default duration. Those are based on crew day calculations for the items that are rolled up. We are not providing a start date beyond, I don't know if this is today's date or the project date, but we're not trying to impose any sort of logic around relationships or start dates based on information from when the estimate. What we are providing are things like labor hours and expenses for each of the activities. And depending on the reception, we will continue to invest in this integration with things like resource loading and other automation tools that help the development of a schedule, help make the development of schedule more efficient. So we do have, just to demonstrate that this is a real schedule, you do have the ability to create the relationships once you're in the project, and spread those out. You have the ability to do things like adjust durations and adjust your start finish activities. So it's pretty functional. And again, as with the cash flow report, it's completely disconnected from the estimate. So once you generate the export file and import it in, you are building a new project or a new project iteration, and then you have exclusive responsibility to ensure that the data is accurate after that. Okay, let's see, how are we doing on time? Pretty good. So that gets us through the two new features that I wanted to highlight, as well as to visit some of the basic workflows. And that's actually about as far as I wanted to go. So with that, let me go back to my PowerPoint slide deck. This is the workflow that we ran through. A couple additional features that I wanted to highlight that didn't come out in the demonstration but are worth noting. We have made changes to the recently viewed section. For those of you have used previous versions of Navigator and depended on that. No longer can you stay in recently viewed after selecting a project or an estimate. It brings you back to active. So it's an important change from a workflow standpoint. If you've got questions about that, I'd be glad to explore it in more detail later. We have more capabilities to customize fields. Navigator was already pretty flexible in terms of what you could call things, renaming, say, project lead to project manager or proposal lead, being a simple example. But there are a few areas where we didn't support the customization that we now do. Data panel was a kind of an advanced panel concept for administrators that was only available through the admin module. It's now available on the front end. So if you want to build your own stored procedures or data collection methods, you can see that information in a panel in the project mode. We now have the ability to, for those of you that have feature access control enabled, we now have the ability to not only have a job classification type of list or Boolean or numeric. We now have the hyperlink option. So you can hyperlink to things like, well, I don't know, the CRM system that's associated with the estimate. We also have the ability to set a job classification field as read-only. So if you want to store information in a field but not give the end user the ability to edit it, you're now able to do that. And then of less sexy note, the admin mode has been completely overhauled. For those of you that were involved with previous versions, it still retained the old tab sub-tab construct. That's been replaced with views and panels. In addition to that, we've added in some new panels to make it easier to initially configure and later on maintain the system. So that's an exciting advancement. And then we've completely updated the installer, which makes, especially for new clients, the process of getting the software initially up and running much simpler. And for those of you that are already using the software, the upgrade process is actually quite improved as well. Alrighty, and that gets us to the end of my formal presentation and on to the question period.
Great, thanks, Greg. We do have some questions coming in. The first one is, you didn't mention the archive button. What does that do?
Ah, that is a very good question. So I can actually jump back and present it. So archives became available in version 2.3, the version that came out in March. Prior to that, clients that wanted to isolate their active versus inactive projects had to use an attribute, which kind of sort of worked, but it didn't have the same effect of not only being able to isolate the active estimates, but also restrict the ability to edit an inactive estimate. So if I go back to, where do I want to go? Office, and clear out my filter. I guess I'll stick with this one. I now have the ability to archive this project. You'll see that my record count has been reduced to 9. So what we're saying is whatever, Dade County went on hold and or we lost the job and we don't need to worry about it anymore, but we still want to be able to look at the information and reference it. So there it is. We can still get into it. We can still see all the stuff we used to be able to see. There's just no edit button. We can still access an estimate, but as you'll see here, we can only access it as a temporary snapshot, meaning that any changes we might make would be discarded. So, so that's archive. It's been a popular feature for those that have upgraded to 2.3. The intent is that for the 80% of your projects and corresponding estimates that aren't in active use, you can just move them off to the side, improves performance, reduces clutter, you know, and just kind of speaks to the point of maintaining an organized system. And then if you change your mind, you can always bring it back to a restored state. What else you got, Maddie?
That's a great feature, thank you. The next one is, are all these features, including the P6 integration, available with the basic software at no additional charge?
So definitely the P6 feature is available at no additional cost. I'm going to equivocate a little bit because some of these reports that I showed, while they may not be packaged in the product, I can make them available to you. It's just, we just haven't incorporated it into the build. Cash flow, definitely. P6 export, definitely. It's kind of a hard concept to really discuss. Generically, we deliver the product with factory settings. So while it may not seem like when you open up the lid, you've got everything you need, it's there. You just need to spend the time either with us or independently to configure the software to bring the features out that you're interested in. And if anybody has more specific direct questions about, you know, what may or may not be in, I'd be glad to talk to you about that. But everything that I've shown today is available, yes.
Great, thank you. The next one is the P6 schedule resources loaded?
Yeah, I mentioned that, but just in passing. So that was, we had to draw the line somewhere when we built that out. It is not resource loaded, meaning that that labor and equipment resources that are embedded in crews do not come over to the schedule, and we don't have, you know, the carpenter count and the backhoe hours that some schedulers might want. It's something that we're considering in a future release, and anyone that has feedback about the benefits of that and how they'd like to see that work, I'd love to talk to you.
Great, thank you. Next one, the project notes feature is nice. Can the data be copied into a proposal?
Yes, so a couple different ways to answer that. Out of the box, you can scrape the data out and paste it into a Word document. We also, through our integration tools, can automatically export it to an Excel, you know, file format or Word format that you could then use. It would require a little bit of customization to target a proposal template, but that's certainly something that we could easily support you with.
Perfect. You mentioned that this is a minor release, or I'm sorry, a minor version. Should we wait for the next release to upgrade?
It's a great question. I know for many of you, upgrading your system is a significant endeavor, and we encourage you not to take the upgrade lightly. If you had to pick one upgrade a year, sorry for the train in the background, and you've already upgraded 2.3, I'd wait for 2.4, unless there's specific features that you find attractive. And there may be some exceptions depending on your implementation and you know, what your needs are. And for a few of you that I'm seeing on the call, we've actually introduced some functionality specifically for you, and you know, in that case, I'd recommend. The release notes will be available when the public announcement comes out. I encourage you to take a look at it. For all of you, get the software onto a pre-production environment, and you know, and help decide for yourself if the timing is right.
Great. Next question. I may have missed it, but how do I get validation?
Okay. There's actually two ways. The first, and the one that I showed, would be to use the context menu for an estimate, and then there should be, for the 3 sample validation scripts, items down at the submenu level. And then, as we did with the cash flow and P6 export, you can also access it from the actions menu on the estimate view.
Perfect. Next one. It sounds like I need a license key to upgrade. How do I get one?
Yeah, that's a good point. We didn't really talk much about that. So again, 2.4 it has a new license management system that controls user access. It's a concurrent use model. It's the same basic technology of what we're using with Cortex, for those of you that also have that product. So anybody that attempts to launch the software is sending a signal to the license management subsystem to confirm that there's an available license they can check out. And then once their session ends, whether they log out or the session is lost, that license is relinquished. So how do you get a license? So contact your account manager or EOS support. We can get you the number at the end of this call, and they'll be able to provide that to anybody that is a client in good maintenance standing. And then it's as simple as running the installer and just plugging in a key, and you're on your way. And I guess I should also say, if you have a need to change your license count or your subscription period, we can also distribute updated keys, you know, to adjust to the new terms.
Great, thanks, Greg. I'm not seeing any new questions at this time.
Okay.
So it looks like we can wrap up a little bit early, and I will send an email with this recording. And if you have any questions, just reach out to Greg or myself.
Yeah. Yep. And I guess I can say in closing as well, you know, thanks for the time. As always, it's great to have an opportunity to discuss the product. And, you know, as Maddie mentioned, we're glad to discuss one-on-one or present a more customized message to your team as we go. We've invested heavily in videos, so if you haven't yet, please take a look at our website and the video library. It, among other things, includes video promoting P6 export in the cash flow, largely what we saw, but something you can take with you. And yeah, and that's it.
Great, thanks, Greg.
Yep.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.